6, 5, 4, 3.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Well That Effing Figures on a Wednesday night, because we just couldn't wait till 5:31 to start this shit. So we started tonight, and what better way to start than with Mr. Justin Welborn. Justin's been in so many movies, TV shows, to name a few: Final Destination, The Signal, and The Crazies. So without further delay, Justin, thank you for your time. Thanks for joining us tonight. And how are you tonight, man?
I'm good, man. I've been looking forward to this. So ever since you guys reached out.
Yeah.
We've been looking forward
to get this Wednesday night thing started a little early, man. So when you said that worked perfect, I was like, yeah, let's get our feet wet on Wednesday night, and it worked.
Yeah, with the writer strike going on, man, you just it's hard to plan 2-3 weeks in advance. You just don't know what's going to happen. You know, I was like, well, probably not going to work again until, who knows? We'll throw it up. But then I had a couple auditions just come in and finish them up today. So you don't know. So turned out good timing.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, when he brought up your name, I was like, oh hell yeah! I was like, I've seen everything he's done. Like, I'm serious. I knew right away who you were.
Oh shit!
I went back last night and I was watching. I watched a couple things just to refresh my memory, but I was watching The Crazies, right? And I'm sitting there, I'm like getting pretty far into the movie. I'm like, where the hell is he? And all of a sudden, you come when you got like the virus and everything. I'm like, there he is. And I was like, wait. Was that or
yeah, man.
You're with virus without? It was funny.
Yeah, like
when I auditioned for that, I had this whole like monologue I had to do for the thing, and then they bring you in and they're like, "You will never speak," and you're like, "Oh, okay." You're just gonna jump on Timothy Oliphant and wrap a telephone cord around him and try and actually kill him. Mm-hmm. Which were my instructions. Tim, just kept going harder, and you're like, I'm gonna kill him. And the more he yells at me at 4 a.m. in the morning, I'm more and more tempted to just drive that knee in and pull that telephone cord back.
I love him too.
He's a great guy, man. Yeah, and working with him on Justified was really groovy.
I've always been a big fan of him too.
Yeah, he's so super talented. And the fact that they're bringing back Justified for, I don't know if it's a limited series or if it's going to be an ongoing thing, but,
that's awesome.
And it's going to be set in Detroit, which is, totally what Elmore Leonard set a lot of his stories in Detroit, mm-hmm. which I thought was really neat. Miami and Detroit and, Harlan was just kind of an afterthought in in a couple of those stories, like, the original story that Justified came from. And I think there are two, aren't there? I can't remember their names right now. Anyway, yeah, he's a great guy, man. Walton Goggins, though, that was my man. I mean, getting to work with him. He's also from Georgia, and so am I.
Oh,
it was
really
a real
treat
to get to work with him, man.
That was a really good series. I was going to start it again last night, Godless, and I just didn't get to it, but I love that show.
Man, I'll tell you, if you ever have an opportunity to be paid to work riding a horse and being a bad guy with somebody like, Jeff Daniels, do it.
Everybody in that series was just gold.
Yeah. And so many of those people have gone on and done really great things. I mean, and all the guys that were in our gang, the bad guy gang, so many, they show up in Daredevil and, Station 12. They're all working actors too. And it's really good. When you're like, I know exactly who that is, my goal's sort of been in that, that guy in that thing. As long as you know that I'm out there and that every time that I show up, that it's something that, well, at least my work is good. Mm-hmm. All those guys are the same thing, mm-hmm. quality people, and their work is pretty great. And plus, to have a Steven Soderbergh produced show that is primarily a town full of women, that are that strong, that are able to really show and not have not be so male dominated. I mean, there is a love story between a man and a woman, but to really see all those strong women just really get to be centered in on for a Western, That's just, you don't see that very often. You know?
Oh no, I was completely hooked in that entire series, and then like there was big upsets. There was, oh man, I loved it. I loved it so much.
No, I loved it, man.
When it ended, I was just like, man, this is something I want to see just go on and on.
I would have taken that. Yeah, I would have kept working, man. That was almost 4 months, and they had already been filming for a while. So that is maybe the longest I've been on a set. I think that's right. Yeah. But I mean, I basically was living in New Mexico for all that time, and I loved it. Some of the guys went a little crazy living in the motel, you know, and after a while they're away from their families and things, but I was single and I just rented a car, and on my days off, I go exploring around New Mexico, and, you know, can't get better than that, at least for me.
That would, I think, like, I would love to try out acting or do something like that. I mean, I've always loved movies. I loved TV, but I feel like if that would be like my dream to either play Western or medieval.
I am still waiting on my knights in armor, sword swinging. I mean, I did all that as a kid. I've done medieval festivals and where I got to be a knight, and you know, I've learned to fight with a sword. I'm still waiting on my chance to get to come and do that one of these days, man. It's
I could see you on like Game of Thrones. I could see it, like, you know.
Just throw me in there, man. I did a Mastodon video a long time ago, and when those guys showed up as wildlings in Game of Thrones, I was like, yeah, my boys.
Right,
there they are. That's how they die. Although when Ed Sheeran showed up, I am one of those people that was like, I mean, he's good, I'm glad he's singing, but that's Ed Sheeran. You know, it kind of takes you out of the world a little bit when you definitely know who they are.
I mean, I was jealous. I mean, you know,
well, sure, dude. Yeah.
You know, like
most popular show in the world. Yeah, sure. Yeah,
being a fan, like he was probably loving life at that moment. I mean, I give it to him.
They're all fans. I mean, that was the thing. After it had gained momentum, I mean, they're calling Game of Thrones and like, hey, can we be on? And of course, you know, the producers are just bringing them in.
There was another where I forgot what band it was. And I can't believe I'm forgetting this, but during the Red Wedding or whatever, I think they were up there. They were like playing they weren't playing their music, but they were playing like, you know, old medieval type music.
Really?
And it was an actual metal band. Yeah. I'll have to look it up and refresh my memory, but it's been a while.
Wow.
So. But yeah,
I remember always, I mean, I read the books first, so I knew it was coming, but at the same time, it's still, I rewatched it, I don't know, during COVID, and it's still such a shocking scene. It's so well done, you know, and it's got all the music in the way until right at the very end where it's just, they take her out and it's just silent, you know, and you really do. And one of my favorite things right after that was watching the reaction videos of, you know, how people would gather together in bars and watch Game of Thrones and just, screaming and silent. Oh man, I love the human dynamic like that Game of Thrones can kind of bring up to that point, you know. Same thing when Arya killed the Night King. You can watch people just like just like a you know, football touchdown, just go crazy, man. I love entertainment for that sort of thing. It can really bring.
I didn't read the books until after I watched everything. And I still remember when Jon Snow got killed by the Night's Watch. My heart was pounding for like 3 hours straight after. Like I was like, you know, like that's when you know something's good and you're like, you love it because
and now you've got to wait a whole nother season to figure out like what the fuck's gonna happen.
I have not watched one episode of that.
You're missing out.
I have. Well, I tried the first one, and they were walking through the snow and shit, and I'm like, this is boring. I'm turning it off. I never went back to it. Maybe someday. Maybe we get snowed in.
You missed out on one of the greatest things ever.
It is a cultural thing. It is one of these things that like move things around. But yeah, that's strange. I would have thought a fantasy science fiction wrestling Star Wars fan would be totally into Game of Thrones, but you know,
I might give it a chance sometime. See, the Final Destination, those movies. I actually did you have fun making that one? Because I love those movies.
Oh yeah, and I mean, also, here's the first thing: is that I auditioned. I sent in a tape from Atlanta, and I was driving home from work, some stupid job, and I got the call that I had a call back, but it was in 2 days, and I had to go to New Orleans from Atlanta, and that's a ways away. And and I called up my first agent, who was my mom, essentially, unofficially. And I was like, told her, and I was like, I don't think I can really pull it off, And she went, well, if you don't go, you can't get it, can you? And I was like, that's a good point. So I spent the money and I flew down there, and it was the day after Fat Tuesday. So it's the day after Mardi Gras. Everybody's hungover, and I got there really early. You see them sweeping up the streets and everything. And it wasn't until later on that day, and I got on in that audition, and everybody there it's for a part, literally on paper, the racist. And they had guys in camouflage and huge, big guys that looked like they were in prison or were, had just escaped from prison. And I'm like in a t-shirt and jeans and go in there. And it's one of those weird auditions where there are just 12 people there. I could see myself on the monitor, which is super distracting. And I just got really angry and just kind of did the audition. And I don't really remember it much. And I left, and I was like, I blew that. That's over. And I just went out and had a good time in New Orleans and came home. Didn't think anything about it. And then the day that my movie, The Signal, came out in theaters and we premiered it in Atlanta was the day I got the call that I got Final Destination.
Nice.
And that was, just to begin with, before even making the movie, something that I was like, that's sort of the universe calling out to you. And either you listen or you don't. And obviously I listened. It was something that when I showed up, and David Ellis, the director, I just driven into New Orleans, and he was like, oh my God, is this your costume? You look great. I was like, these are my clothes. So I just dress like this.
Right.
And I had a blast, man. That was the biggest thing. Still one of the bigger, like you're in the show. You got great food, you got hundreds of people, you got all the toys, they're blowing shit up, there's fire, there's all the great Final Destination stuff,
Yeah.
And that same crappy job, I asked them, I was like, hey, I'm gonna be gone like I don't know, man, a month or two. Could you just hold my job while I'm gone? And like when I come back, maybe I can step back into it. They were like, absolutely not. But you have to go make this movie because we love Final Destination movies. So yeah, man, it was a blast. There are drawbacks in the way that, like, even making the movie, my character didn't have a name for the longest time. I kind of gave him my own history and things like that. But it's on your door and it just says racist. And you're like,
I think it's labeled like that on like IMDb or something too.
Yeah,
I've seen it somewhere. It says racist.
Yeah, it's on IMDb like that. Exactly. Yeah.
Great. Well, and that's okay. My goal has been to not necessarily be the Hollywood racist, which, people love to like typecast you and things like that. And being Southern, it's a really easy thing to do. But I also did things for myself because, you're working with great people like Michael T. and but you got to say horrible things and you got to be a horrible person and really get into that. But, yeah, man, you're wearing swastikas and things like that. And I just needed to also do things to kind of offset that. I read Schindler's List. You just need to do things that disempower those really strong, shitty symbols and, so that you can get it off you. There aren't many films that I've really needed to kind of protect myself a little bit from. But, even when you're having fun, it can be kind of crappy when you have to play something like that because these are your friends and these are people you like and are professionals and you admire them. And then you, have to do something really terrible or say something really racist. But yeah, man, that was the show. You get to come to set and same thing with Godless, same thing with, so many showing up to Justified, best job ever. I lived right there in Hollywood and I'm driving to Santa Clarita. That's like your backyard. It's just 30 minutes up the road and you're going to work with people who are happy to be there and you're learning all the time. And even when it's hard and difficult, it's the best job ever. It's when I was a little kid And they said, write down the 3 things you'd like to be when you grow up. And I was like, well, I'd like to be an actor, a lawyer, or a supervillain. And I wanted to be a lawyer because of that show, L.A. Law. And they looked like they were having fun. So actually, I just wanted to be an actor that played a lawyer. So yeah, I've gotten to do all 3 of those things since then. So that's pretty good. I haven't played a lawyer yet. I've always been the prisoner, but but one of these days.
Another one I noticed that you were in, you had an episode of The Shooter.
Yeah, actually, I was just thinking about that because I was like, oh yeah, I played a prison guard too. I've done that twice. Yeah. I watched that whole show. I kind of liked it. I think Ryan Phillippe did a good job with that. I had a really good time shooting it. I mean, once again, that's just one of those things that you drive out into the desert, just up in Palmdale. It's 40 minutes away, and then all of a sudden you're working with Ryan, and you know, being terrible to him, and you know, it really is an old. It was a women's prison, I think we shot that in. That's been decommissioned, but just across the way, about a mile away, is the actual prison that they're using. And there are all these signs along the road that are like, do not pick up hitchhikers, which is always like, oh, yeah. Anybody you find along this road, just don't give them a ride.
Right. Yeah. If they're wearing an orange jumpsuit, leave them alone. Right.
Yeah. No, I mean, Shooter was kind of a unexpected, just one of those jobs you audition for and suddenly you get it. You're there. And I often don't play law enforcement, but every law enforcement I do play is some kind of corrupt son of a bitch. So, you know, I guess there is a type. Yeah.
That's cool.
Now, like when you show up like with some of the, you know, like Ryan Phillippe or Jeff Daniels, how is that? Like, do you get in your head, or like
you do a little bit to begin with, because like Way of the Gun is one of my favorite movies that Ryan ever did. You know, I like Cruel Intentions and stuff like that. That's all heartthrob stuff. And but like Way of the Gun is an amazing movie. You know, Benicio del Toro and Ryan, and just I mean, so good. So when I kind of got there, there's that, but you kind of slide really easy into like, or at least I do, into the fact that this is the scene we got to do, and this is where you belong in the scene, and this is what you got to do. And you know, if I'm hitting him or being really close to him, then you know, you got to make sure all that. So it also gets very technical, and that's the skill or trade of it. Also figuring out, like, I think I had to walk with him at one point, and there are all these background people, and the camera's following you. I mean, you want to get it. You want to get all your lines in as few takes as possible, because all of this goes into, you know, there's a lot of activity here. And if I just keep fumbling these lines, you know, for more than a few takes, it gets to be a drag. So I kind of just dip right into that. Now, Jeff Daniels was a different thing, because he's just Jeff Daniels. But he is the most easygoing. I mean, he's a theater actor as well. He's so nice, and just a real genuine person, really friendly. He sometimes you feel like, you know, you don't really talk about other project. You know, you don't go up, you know, my favorite movie that you've been in is blah 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 blah. You know, and you start talking until you've known them for a little while. And I mean, we were sitting on those horses for hours, you know, just sitting around. And so getting to hear him talk about everything from Dumb and Dumber to, you know, all of the amazing movies that he's done. And he is the artistic director of a theater up in Michigan, where he's from, and getting to hear him talk about that. He's real political. So, and this was right when Hillary and Trump were running against one another. The day, here's a good one. The day that the election went to Trump, and I mean, Jeff is a rabid Democrat, right? And which is great. And it was a quiet day in the transpo van in the morning. Just everybody just looked like, what the fuck has happened? What are we doing, right? And Jeff was just wrecked, man. He was so angry, and we all kind of just knew to give him his space. And it was a busy day. It was just like we had all this stuff to shoot. And that was the day that he got to deliver this monologue that's like, this is the land of the snake and the scorpion, the knife and the gun. This is godless country. The show is called Godless. He's got to get this, man. And he just siphoned all of that disgust from that particular result of the election into that. And it was powerful, man. It was always really great to watch him work because he always knew his lines. He always knew other things that he could try. I'm a huge fan of professionalism like that. I mean, not just show up on time, but really, really, doing the work, which is the sort of thing that makes your game come up. You really want to help emulate that and do the best because you're supporting this person in this great role, not just like, look at me, you're trying to really be there for him, and at the very end, the very last day that we were all going to be together that night, all the gang got together at one of the guys' houses, and we had dinner, and Jeff showed up with his dog. We had no idea that he was going to come, man, and he just showed up. And that night we just sat around and laughed and told stories about the whole shoot, and man, that was the most humanizing thing I think I've ever had with a Hollywood star, because he's just so real, and talking about like when he did what was it? Network, the HBO show he did, the Newsroom, right?
Newsroom, yeah,
that's the one. And that first episode where he does that big monologue where he's talking about America and he's giving all those statistics, he had only gotten that monologue like 2 days before.
Wow.
And he really just had it down. And they were asking me if he wanted cue cards, and he said that executives from HBO had shown up. I mean, they were really like, we'd shot all this episode, but we didn't really know how to begin it. And then, all of a sudden, here is this monologue, and we think this is how the show is really going to start because it's got to go out with a bang. And they were just kind of betting the whole thing on this one monologue, and he knocked it out in one take, and then they shot a couple others for safety, but they knew right then that they had it. And that was really amazing to hear that such a successful thing had been really, up in the air, and that it really took that kind of performance to solidify it.
Wow.
Yeah, he was a great guy, man. Amazing to work with.
So that's a fun story, a nice memory for you. That's
right.
I mean, that's the stuff that keeps you warm when you're not working.
Yeah.
You're like, these people are just people, and some are a little luckier and some are going to be in it for a little while, and then other people are in it for their whole life. And he's a great guy. He's an easygoing guy. I've worked with a few others that weren't so easygoing.
I was gonna say it's nice when it turns out that way, because it's like the worst thing ever when you meet like someone you've looked up to, and they turn out to be a real piece of work, and you're just like, man, But
now I had to learn from that too, because doing the Crazies, my first impressions with Tim Oliphant, we were shooting at like 4 a.m, and it was difficult. I was in a lot of makeup. It's a very physical scene. We're doing all this stuff. And he was already just in a bad mood. And it was one of the things that, it was hard to kind of take in. Is he mad at you? Is he mad at this? And it wasn't until later that I really found out, like, the shoot was already like 2 or 3 weeks over schedule. His family's back in Los Angeles, he's been away from there. We're in Perry, Georgia, in the middle of nowhere. And, these are the kind of things, and he's the star of the movie. He's got to hold all that stuff up. And so differentiating between, this moment and is this person a dick or whatever, you got to take in what their responsibilities are over that. Now, if somebody's just kind of dismissive or I haven't actually experienced a lot of that. You know, a lot of the people that I've found that are a little more difficult to work with are, are the people that are sometimes other guest stars, or you know, they're at your level or lower, and they're actually the ones that for some reason are difficult to work with. The guys that are kind of regulars on shows, most of them have been, you know, they also kind of feel that I'm lucky to be here. I'm glad to be here. I like being here. You know, there were exceptions, but for the most part, yeah, it is always great to connect with people doing the thing you love because it's the thing they love. And, you know, and as a guest star or so forth, you are a guest on their show, you know, and, you know, my mom raised me right. I know what a good guest does in somebody else's house. And, you know, it's nice to feel welcomed and be part of the party, you know?
Oh yeah, I never looked at it that way actually. Does your family have like a past in acting, or is it just something that you got into? Like
no, it's you know, I sometimes think my mother rused the day that when I was like 9 years old, she took me to this summer play to be in, because I was always imagining and pretending and all these things. And you know, it was just it was a summer play at like a mall. I don't know. I don't know how she found it, but it was a community kind of thing. And it was Stone Soup. It was this play where this stranger comes to town and he gets everybody he grifts everybody's good stuff and puts stones in soup. And I don't know. I had the best time. And from that point on, like every summer I was in some kind of acting program since I was a kid, and anything during the year, you know, so I was really the only one that did it. My brother did it for a little while in high school, but he moved away from that afterwards. So in my family, I'm the only one that's gone on to be a performer, but my whole family's been involved in teaching. My parents are great teachers, have always been amazing storytellers. My brother works at the library at Duke University. I'm the least degreed and educated person of my entire family, but I'm also the one that kind of went out there and traveled a lot first. I've had hundreds of jobs, you know, and I just knew what I wanted to do. And it's not that I was always able to do it to get paid. And I do come from a theater background overwhelmingly, but when I decided to, I mean, we kind of in Atlanta, we're doing independent movies and theater. We were all the same people. I was directing these guys that in theater that directed me in the Signal, you know, in the same theaters. And so when they call you up and they're like, hey, I want you to be in my movie. And, you know, when they said, we'll give you $600 and a point in the movie, I was like, great. What's a point? What does it mean? You know? And then that just kind of set it off. When we came back from Sundance to that, this was sort of the moment that I saw my parents go from, we're a little bit worried about him. And, you know, Justin, you know, he's a dreamer. He's always putting it out there. And, you know, I remember my dad driving me to the airport, and he's like, hey, if you need a ride home, you know, give me a call, or maybe you can find somebody else. And I called them up from Sundance when we sold the Signal for like $2.6 million and was like, Dad, we did it. And yeah, man, they picked me up and steak dinner and the whole bit. And from that point on, they've been a lot less worried. They saw that it was something real. And definitely moving out here was a challenge. But when Justified came through, yeah, they just kind of were like, the kid's going to be okay. You know, it'll be all right. It's never not a worry, because certainly the industry is always like this. And there are long periods of time where I haven't had to work, but, or haven't gotten work. But that doesn't mean that I'm not, you know, trying to do creative things, or that I'm not also still working on what it is that I love to do. And I don't really see any end to it. So yeah, they're very supportive, but I'm the only actor in the family. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And it's, you know, right now it's kind of tough with the strike, but is that looking like it's going to end soon, or is it
It's always something. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's almost cosmically comical because the last 3 years of COVID have already been like,
Yeah.
well, what are we going to do? You know, I guess we'll just figure it out as we go. I mean, I had a lot of auditions for it during COVID, but so much of it was just such limited space in shows. And, you know, they're really trying to hire just their main actors and as few as possible and things like that. But, you know, finally we get through COVID and the year's just really, we've gotten through pilot season a little bit and things are just picking up and now we're in a strike. Now, that being said, they should be striking. They deserve so much of what they're asking for. It really has become a harder industry, even in the, you know, dozen years that I've really been making my living doing it. I mean, it is just a different game. And much of what they're asking for is a very fair and human deal that they deserve. And I'm also for my own union, SAG-AFTRA, going on strike right now rather than wait another month, because our union goes into talks in June and then could go on strike at the end of June. So a little bit of it's just like, you gotta, it's bigger than you are. You have to let the waves of the thing and support it in any particular way you can.
Right.
And I'm 100% for the WGA and what they're asking for. And so many points. I had never really thought as much about the AI stuff as is so well spoken. I mean, Justine Bateman just came out today and had a really amazing breakdown of the sort of things that AI will be able to replace. I mean, in the way of like, well, we've got your, Tom Hanks said it, you know, just recently, you know, I could have a career for another 75 years. I'll be dead, but they'll be able to use my image continuously and just plug it in. Tom Hanks and this person and Saving Private Ryan 3 and go, you know. And
I was just talking about that with my grandfather, actually, because you know, like we've seen that they've done that with actors, and not only bring actors that, you know, that have passed away, but, you know, they made Jeff Bridges look younger for Tron, you know, and like I was thinking, I'm like, dang, if I was an actor, I'd be nervous right now, because I was like, they could just make an actor. You know?
I mean, look at even right now the commercial with Shaquille O'Neal, where he's like the younger him, and
or Harrison Ford in the new Indiana Jones stuff.
Yeah,
we're already like, okay, well, we all know Harrison is like 76 years old, you know, but you can't put a genie back in a bottle. Right. But you can decide what you want to do with that genie, you know, if you actually want to let this out. I mean, it really does seem like now is the time to start deciding how we want to manage it. That's the best way I can put it. You know, if you want my image and you want to use it, you just need to pay for it again. That's okay. You know, I mean, you would want the same thing every time that your book gets sold. You should get rights. That's called residuals. And the idea that you can just pay me once and then use me forever for anything and then just make me do a cellular commercial or whatever is crazy. I mean, that really is amazing corporate greed. And of course they'd like to do that. No boss wants to, or landlord wants to pay any more than they have to fix their problem. You know, it's just not the way. The formula is pay the least for the most. And that's not a human approach in the way of being able to keep an industry that is meant to be a creative human endeavor and an artistic human endeavor sustainable. And there are a lot of people that are in danger of losing these things. But again, I don't think that you can undo what we've created, but I do think you can manage it in a different way. And I think those are very reasonable questions to bring up and very reasonable things to continue to discuss and try to put some real world limitations on it so that people don't lose their, I mean, during COVID, I lost my health insurance from my own union because I was $600 short, but nobody had worked for a year. You know, nobody at all that I knew, you know, overall, it was just big stars that were in. So I had to scramble about. And, you know, I even was like, hey, I'll give you the $600. How about that? And they're like, that's not how it works. And you're like, okay, well, you got to make do and how it is. So it's, it can be an interesting industry when all of a sudden you're like, I don't want just more money. I really don't want this imaginary real world thing to take over the thing that I've worked my whole life to become.
Right.
There is no plan B.
Well,
So
to me, yeah, you could do that, but part of these characters is knowing that there's a real person attached. Like,
of course,
who's gonna go tour and what I'm saying? Like,
and for a while that uncanny valley will be really evident, just as it always has been. But it's getting closer and closer together in that way that we're a little bit like, I'm not real sure, when you see some of these deep fakes of like politicians saying things or whatever it is, it can be pretty unnerving, man. The fact that there is a real person behind it that's writing it, that's scripting it, that's controlling it in a way of how the production goes. And of course, we just, it's because of the organic nature of it that we love it. It really is. It's something that surprisingly happens, not something that is regimented and by probability brought together that this will be the most satisfying and entertaining thing. That doesn't really have much soul. So I don't know. Whenever anybody's ready to go all John Connor and March Against Skynet, I'm there.
Yeah, right. Did anybody watch Terminator? Come on.
I know, right? They literally told us this sounded when the head of AI of Google quits so he can warn people about AI. Yeah, that is the plot of Terminator 2.
Yeah, exactly. Like, come on, guys.
They told us. Right.
We're walking right into this one.
I know. It's so obvious.
So what's it like, auditioning for stuff now? Is there like, for everything you audition for, is there like mass amounts of people, or like, what is that like?
It's definitely a different world. A lot of self-taping now, and there are a lot more people up for these particular roles. One of the things I definitely miss is going into a lot of the rooms where you actually are there with the casting director and so forth. So yeah, it's a very different process than it was before. And it's also, it's been kind of recreating itself, like so much in the world. People are like, oh, I can work from home. And, of course. And see, here's the thing. It's not necessarily just casting directors that are asking for these on-tape auditions, these self-tape auditions. Because the productions are paying for those auditions. So it's cheaper to have the production just goes, we'll put it out to hundreds of people rather than 15 actors. The process of that, though, is once again, you lose the human connection. As we're speaking right now, we have a connection, but at the same time, if we were in the room, we would have a very different connection. I would feel your energy differently and you would feel mine. And that is something that has been a primary asset of mine throughout my whole career. And it's something that I'm having to make adjustments with, and just like hundreds and thousands of other actors are having to make adjustments to that and try to figure out that process, and also realign with where you want to do things. I'm interested in doing audiobook narration. I love reading anyway, and this is the sort of thing that, and to me, it's not necessarily not acting. It's the same thing, same skills, go into it. Doing the podcast, the Monotalk Caves, that's on everything. It's on iTunes. It's been one of the top horror podcasts that's out there. That was performing. You're in the room with the other actors, or they're on Zoom or whatever it is. And I had my director, Dan Bush, who was one of the directors of The Signal. And that was fantastic. It's the same muscles, just a different set of, you're not on camera. So you don't have to do the work of like where it is in your eyes. It's much more internal. You get to work on the voice and the body of it and the intention behind it, but it's all the same skills. Right. It's just different variations of how you're doing it. So,
and I guess like you were saying, now that you audition with videotapes and not going into the studio all the time and doing things like that, you lose a little bit of the marketing aspect, like meeting people, and you never know who you're going to be in the room with, or
if they're watching your tape at all.
Or even if they even give a shit and they already know who they're going to take, and they're just doing this for formality, like even jobs do.
It's tough like that. I miss a lot of that. And it is it is a very real struggle.
The
It
human
is something that I
interaction,
think has been one of the bigger hiccups in my personal career. But at the same time, again, this is the wave of what the future is. It's just not going to go back to the same thing. Now, I did move to Los Angeles to go into those rooms, and that did work, and it can continue to work. And I think things will shift a little bit back towards that, but it'll never completely do it. It will stay in this self-tape variety for a long time because they just can get more people out there. It is cheaper for them to run auditions, and the bottom line is it's a business. And so, that's not going to change, unfortunately, in my opinion, because there are a lot of things about that human aspect of it that are missing out. Certainly definitely. With the self-tapes.
Yeah, that's definitely something that COVID ruined, because the human interaction.
I mean, it's never been an easy industry, and certainly throwing a worldwide pandemic on top of it. I mean, all my theater friends, theater was one of the last things to come back. And all I wanted to do during COVID was go back to doing theater, because you just miss that aspect of being with people and being in the same room and communicating with them. And so that thing that I had sort of put aside to do a lot of film and television, that was the thing that I was super craving again, is really just being able to workshop plays and be there with an audience. And it's been interesting to go back into spaces like that again, and a concert or a freaking bar.
But even with going to the theater at first, you didn't have as many people in there. They were spread out. There was maybe nobody in there.
100%.
I mean, we were talking about wrestling earlier backstage, and they even had, on the two major wrestling shows, they had first they had nobody in the audience when this all first happened. And then they went to TV screens where I could actually, if you ever watch Monday Night Raw, you can see a TV screen like we're on now, watching. And then they had all the TV screens set up around the arena, and that's how they were watching wrestling. And I hated it.
Of course, man.
Oh my God. It was just something we weren't used to. It was just we never thought in our lifetime that we would be part of something that crazy and instantaneous. I mean, it happened boom.
It had been 100 years since we had a, worldwide pandemic. And, I'm reading a book right now by Dan Carlin, who does hardcore history, and it's all about how these civilizations have kind of ended through war. But the way that we had, that disease overall was such a major manufacturer of death among human beings, and the way that peoples were wiped out or moved by or whatever it was much more common in the past. And then the fact that it crops up in our particular lifetimes was, of course, a surprise, where before it wasn't as much of a surprise, or at least it was the horror that they were facing, but it was something that was part of life. It had been there more recently, and it certainly took all of us it took everything by storm. But there were everybody from so many of my theater friends, trying to do things like Zoom plays and, doing plays where they're outside and they're standing away from one another and the audience is sitting. People tried a whole lot of creative things, and I can't say that all of it was great, but I also can't say all of it was bad either. Everybody was trying to do their very best to adapt to, an impossible situation, and putting up TVs like that seemed to be the best they could do to keep these people employed and to keep any audience interested in what it is, rather than just go, well, we'll be back whenever.
Right. Yeah, so I gotta give it to him for thinking of something like that. It was just being a spoiled human being, you're used to certain things, and when you don't expect something like that to happen, you're like, shit. I never knew what I had now until I lost it, And
you know what? And I will say and I'm sure everybody's, everybody's got an opinion of where it is because everybody's been through it. Literally everybody in the world has been through this circumstance, you know, and I can't necessarily say that I am not without scars from that amount of time. It has been harder to socialize. It's been harder to just get back to being a normal person in that way, which I didn't even realize until all of a sudden you're put in these situations where you're surrounded by people. And for several years, you've been all worked up about being around people. But it has put some different, like, I love my career. I've been acting, like I said, since I was a kid, but I was so focused on being here in Los Angeles, being in the industry, being available for jobs, that when all of a sudden it comes up that, like, you can't see your family because you might accidentally kill them. You know, you can't see your little niece and your nephew because you might accidentally give them this horrible, we just didn't know. And it has rearranged a great amount of my own personal priorities of, like, well, you know what? Sometimes you're just not going to be there. You need to go see your family. You need to hang out with your friends. I'm going to go take a trip in August. I talked to my friend, you know, one of my best friends for my whole life. And, you know, he has a big deal at his company. And we're talking about taking like 2 or 3 weeks off, kind of in the middle of time that I'm hoping the strike is over and so forth. So that could be prime time for me to get work. But at the same time, you know, this is the time to go. You know,
Right.
It's time to go and live and do these things. You have to get that balance because work can so easily consume us in a way that you don't end up seeing your kids or seeing your friends or making those connections because, you're being available. And in a few years, you're going to look back and you're not going to remember what it was that you were being available for, but you will remember the fact that you didn't get that time with that person. Or with those people and doing those things that you always wanted to do. And that, I have to at least say, I think is the most positive thing for me to come out of it. Because I feel much more like, I used to say, I'm Justin, I'm an actor. And now I just dropped the second part. It's not that I'm not an actor. That's just something I do, though. Something I've been trained to do, something I've trained myself to do, something I do as a life activity. But I'm me on this planet for a very small amount of time. And I want to go and do things and connect with people and experience things. And that's not all about, as I thought when I was younger, the sacrificing for your art all the time. Actually, you do end up sacrificing a great deal of your life to this activity so that you are available and that you're able to do it. And it's a strange thing that we've all been through. And I hope those that have suffered the most can come through it and find some glimmer, you know, that connects you more to the reality of what we're doing here. Because certainly we have all faced this mortality, and 7 million people are not here anymore, you know, that were just a few years ago, that this thing just changed everybody's life. And I think that's the takeaway for me, at least career wise and life wise, is that, you know, you got to do other things. If you're so centered in on just this thing, you'll be blind to the others. So, yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I definitely think you're right. No matter what, like, even no matter what kind of work you're in, you know, if it's always, you feel like you don't want to miss out and disappoint your job or whatever, but like certain times now that we haven't been able to see our friends, you kind of think, I'm going to go see my friend today because
oh my God,
you never know what could happen.
And our connections are different. You know, I mean, I had a
Yeah.
birthday with Dave Bruckner, one of the directors of The Signal, and my good friend Zoe, who he's married to, Zoe Cooper, who is she's the main writer on the new Blair Witch Project. So I want to give her a shout out. And Dave just directed the Hulu Hellraiser, right? And he was working on that during COVID and things like that. But, you know, it was my birthday and we sat on a lawn 6 feet apart and drank our individual, you know, bottles of whiskey and just hung out outside because that's what we could do at the time, you know. And to turn around and to actually be able to, you know, go hiking with your friends and go over to their house and, you know, play with the dog together and not even think about it. That in and of itself is super weird, you know. But it's really, it's connected me again with my family and my friends, and it's kind of disconnected me from people that didn't really matter as much. You kind of focused in on the ones that do, and the things that I really want to do that maybe I haven't yet. Audiobook stuff, podcasting stuff, all those kind of writing endeavors that you kind of put aside because you've been pursuing this other thing for a little while, for a long time. So. Yeah. Anyway, hope this wasn't too much of a COVID diatribe. I know everybody's been in the same fucking situation, so I don't think these are new and illuminating thoughts that nobody else has had.
Because
but,
even though a lot of a lot of good came out of it from me too. I mean, I'm closer with my family now. I went out and I started my YouTube channel, and
there you go. See, yeah. We had to get creative with our lives, and all that alone kind of centers you in on what is most important, and you had a lot of time to sit inside of yourself and try what is going on. Who is this that I have to be now? And if I only have a small amount of time, what am I going to do it?
Yeah. I mean, if it wasn't for COVID, I probably wouldn't have got back into collecting again. I mean, I needed something I could do home. Right. Something I can do myself. So that's what
I know people that started their graduate programs online, that they've gotten their degrees since then. I know people that have moved, that have, married whoever or gotten divorced from whoever, they're just like, it is time, it is now. So
like you were saying with your friends, like you really, it kind of focused you in on the important stuff, and it kind of cleaned up my life in a sense, I mean, that's.
I think, and make no mistake, I don't want to belittle anybody's pain or the losses that people have had to go through, and the ongoing health problems that come with it. But on a psychological level, we have all gone through a paradigm shift, and that in and of itself cannot help but be a human-wide experience that if you didn't learn anything through that, or that's what you say, I think you're lying. If nothing changed for you really, and you just came out and you're exactly the same person, I don't know. We're just essentially different creatures.
Right.
So.
Yeah. That's true. I think something's changed for everybody. I mean, like you said, I can't. If you're saying nothing's changed, then you're probably mistaken, because it has. One way, either for the good or for the bad, or both.
Right. Or maybe you're just, sociopathic. You are right there, and there are people in your freezer. Maybe.
Right on. And I mean, that's perfect way to end this, because if without it, we wouldn't be sitting here with you right now talking to you. And, we just started this in October. We're not breaking any records or nothing yet. But this was a big sit down with, at least for me today.
I'm glad, man. Also, along in this vein, when Ken Sledge reached out and was absolutely just like, hey, any way you'd be interested in an interview, it just had been a long time since I had connected with fans and interviewers, and just to talk about the things that we love, that we have in common, and telling him to just throw it out into the universe. And since then, it's been such a great pleasure to talk with. Because I come from indie films. This is an indie endeavor. Essentially, the internet is built by people that are doing their own little thing. Sometimes it gets popular. Most of the time, it doesn't. That doesn't mean that the effort is belittled in any way in simply doing it. That's also why I do my career, is that, I didn't really do it to become famous. I just want to do what I love, what I'm interested in, what I'm driven to do. And once again, I think that's something that spark has been rekindled by the hard times that we've just been through and that we're still experiencing. But I do feel a degree of hope for all these kind of endeavors, because I really think, like we were talking about, podcasting gaining momentum, even after 10, 12 years, it's only become more popular. That's because of all the little voices that have been putting their creativity into it and making it what it is today, which is just an ever-growing endeavor that all these people are able to put out there. So don't do it just because it's a pursuit of fame or
No.
even glory, man. Just do it because you
No.
love doing it.
I
that you
think
like.
me and Colin are on the same page, man. We do this because it's fun. It started out like a little hobby for us. We get to talk to some really awesome people like yourself. And we're, if nothing else, 10, 15 years down the line, we're going to have a lot of footage to look back at. And it's fucking memories that we're never going to forget. Like having you on the night and talking like
Well,
this.
thanks, man. That's how I look at my own movies too. I get to look back on them, 10, 12 years later and go, man, I was a lot more handsome then, but God, everybody looked so good back then. We were awesome. That's the great part about putting it out there and, having it forever. So thanks so much for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Cause years ago you had photos, maybe Polaroids, but now we have this to look back on, things like this. And this for me, that's why I love doing this. And that's why sometimes when I reach out to someone like yourself, and this is nothing personal on you, this is just everybody I reach out to, I'm thinking, I wonder if I'm going to hear back. And then boom, there you were. And it wasn't even a few hours later, I don't think. And
no, I'm pretty reactive. If somebody reaches out and they want to talk, man, if I'm around and it's possible at all, I'll make the time. I really enjoy it. I love talking about what we do, what I do, what we're interested in. And once again, this is something that, it creates connection. And you never know where those connections are going to go. Who you talk to today might be the next thing tomorrow, which might lead to the script that becomes you don't know, man.
You never know.
You might get a really good part and say, man, I need 2 people to help me on this movie. And I remember these 2 jackasses that interviewed me. Let me call them. You know what I mean?
Wait a minute. I know I've got them on Instagram here somewhere. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you guys willing to be shot out of a cannon simultaneously?
Sure, I'll do it. Yes. How much is it paying?
Sign me up.
Oh yeah.
Well,
awesome.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah,
thank you to
our you know what,
Duffman and Captain Spaulding and Mega Demon for watching. Everybody else, we had a great time tonight.
Yeah, we always say once you're on this show, man, you're a friend for life. We'll keep in touch, I hope, and maybe we'll have you on sometime again when you get a free minute. But hopefully you don't get too many free minutes because I want you to do good. I want you to get more roles. I want you to do awesome things.
It's always out there, man. I'm always working on something, and you never know what it's going to be. But I appreciate the sentiment, and man, I'd love to come back. And thanks everybody else for watching the work and stay creative.
Yeah, if you don't mind staying, we'll say goodbyes backstage real quick. And,
sure. Bye, guys.
Yeah.
See you guys later.
Everybody in the chat, thank you. Yep. And Sunday we'll be on again, 9 a.m. It's our last 9 a.m. on Sunday morning show. We're actually moving to Wednesdays at 9 p.m. on 531. And we'll be in Tennessee the week after, 2 weeks from now, whatever it is, for ICCC. So next week's our final Sunday morning show with Joey from Way Back When Collectibles and Antiques. And he has 2 VIP tickets and a weekend pass for ICCC. So if you're in the chat and you want to go to ICCC and you want to win some tickets for free, join us on Sunday at 9 a.m. But for now, that's what effing figures, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Later, guys.
Again, sir.